There we go. Let's see. Okay. Got chats up over there. My Rumble's freezing, which is nice. Okay. Let's just say, Why is it doing that? Okay. It looks like YouTube's fixed. What's going on today? Vladimir Lenin. Let's see if we can get a community note. That'd be fun. I think it'd be my first one. Copy. Paste. That is the goofiest. A lot's going on today. Vladimir Lenin. Do you guys remember when he said that? That's what it feels like. Let's see. Is this one working? I got Mike Phantom back. Love and positivity. I'll need it today. I think I got my camera fixed though. Look at that. Everything looks different. Everything's working different. But it's alright. I think we figured it out. At least for the time being. Lots to cover the day. Seems like decades have happened. But we're here to cover it all and hopefully keep you guys caught up in less than an hour today. I don't know if that's going to happen. But let's get right into it. Make sure you guys are dropping a like. Chat with me today if you're not driving. Share it with somebody. Keep them informed. Because hopefully we're going to get through all this in an hour or so. And you won't have to watch 5 hours of commercial news later. So, yeah, try and share it with somebody. This will be a good one today. Today is Friday, February 20th, 2026. This is episode number 59 of Addressing the Issues. So, the Supreme Court ruled today 6-3 that President Trump's IEPA, International Emergency Economic Powers Act tariffs, were illegal. This is from the Learning Sources Incorporated versus Trump suit. I do believe that's right. Yeah, Learning Resources Incorporated versus Trump suit. We're going to call them the Leering Resources because they don't care about America. They don't like America. The Supreme Court determined that the IEPA tariffs, as President Trump calls them, are reserved for a national emergency. I'd argue that this is a national emergency now. The dissenting justices were Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Brett Kavanaugh. The court ruled that the president could license trade in countries, however, he could not charge a licensing fee, such as tariffs, meaning that he has the power to completely cut off trade. However, he does not have the power to charge money for trade. So that's where we are with that, basically. I don't understand how you can completely cut off trade, but you can't regulate it. makes no sense to a common folk like me, but that's what the Supreme Court ruled, and that is now the law of the land. Justice Thomas in his dissent claimed neither the statutory text nor the Constitution provide a basis for ruling against the president. That was his dissent, part of his dissent today. In Justice Kavanaugh's dissent, he laid out a roadmap for re-implementing tariffs outside the use of IEEPA. He cited the Tariff Act of 1930, the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, and the Trade Act of 1974. This ruling alternatively will not impact tariffs filed under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which allows tariffs on product that impact national security, meaning that with this ruling, tariffs on aluminum and steel will remain unaffected. I believe that also goes to other critical things such as uranium and such. I'm not sure that there are any current law tariffs on uranium, but stuff like that, stuff that is impacting national security, are not affected if it goes through Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Justice Kavanaugh's dissent also raised questions about what would be done with the already $175 billion acquired through the government through these tariffs. Justice Kavanaugh wrote, "The court's decision is likely to generate other serious practical consequences in the near term. One issue will be refunds, and he also said, the court says nothing today about whether or if so how the government should go about returning the billions of dollars it has collected, but this process is likely to be a mess." And I agree. It's going to be a mess. It is a mess. Here's the interesting thing about this. The foreign governments did not pay the tariffs. They forced the companies doing business overseas and importing the products to pay these tariffs. Then these companies, capitalizing on cheap labor overseas, then pass the cost of these tariffs off to the consumer, meaning you, the consumer, footed this bill because you chose to purchase from a company doing business overseas. However, there's no discussion of giving the refund to the consumer. The discussion is between paying the money to the countries which negated the cost of the tariffs to the companies, or the companies that negated the cost of these tariffs to their consumers. So basically, in the most likely scenario, as of right now, this is going to allow companies that decided to do business overseas to double dip from both tariff revenue and the consumer. So that's what this ruling looks like as of now, especially given that they don't have any concrete plans for how to return this money. I think it should go straight back to the consumer, because the cost has been negated downhill, down track to the consumer. We're the ones that have had to pay this, and now they're companies that we've allowed to use cheap labor overseas are double dipping from what should be our money. I guess that's my whole main problem with how this has turned out. I think we should be investing at home, building industry here, building our products here. It's kind of crazy, like in the modern day, especially with like aluminum and steel, how it could be absolutely sabotaged by another country. Steel that we use to build ships, build aircraft, could just be sabotaged. We're just fine with adversaries making it, capitalizing on us. I think it's really interesting, and I think it could have really severe downstream consequences, particularly in national defense matters. But at a press conference today, in response to the Supreme Court's decision, President Trump said that a 10% tariff will be implemented across the board for every country in 3 days through Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. This is a temporary fix while the government will investigate countries for unfair trade practices under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. Section 301 outlines how these tariffs can be implemented through initiation, administration, consultations, determinations, and implementation, retaliatory action, and subsequent action, meaning that you have to investigate, implement the tariffs, and then if you do see retaliatory action, you're allowed to retaliate back with higher tariffs. Basically what we've been doing all along, we've just checked the wrong box and used IEEPA instead of the Trade Act of 1974. But President Trump claimed that through this process, tariffs may be much steeper than they were previously. The president claimed today that tariffs were not going anywhere. They will just need to go through an alternative process to implement them. So we're going to get our tariffs back, probably. It's just going to take longer. And we're going to lose money in the process. I mean, we're just pissing away money at this point through not just the $175 billion that will likely be returned to these large companies, not consumers, the consumers that ended up paying for the tariffs, but also whatever loss of tariff revenue that will no longer be generated at the same rate, with only a 10% flat rate as the investigation processes for unfair trade practice as outlined in Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 do play out. And this really actually hurts countries that do have fair trade practices with the implementation of the 10% flat rate across the board. We did have countries that are going to be adversely affected, trading partners that do treat us fair. But just because of this decision, we're gonna have to treat them unfairly for at least the time being. But another interesting part about this whole tariffs situation is that a member of Trump's cabinet who worked to implement these tariffs stands to make a fortune. His family stands to make a fortune over this court ruling. Howard Lutnick's family bought up rights to tariff refunds on and around Liberation Day last year for just pennies on the dollar. These were valued at roughly 20 to 30 cents a piece, and the family stands to make 3 to 5 times the money invested in the rights to tariff refunds, which were purchased from these companies. And we'll get back to him at the end of today's episode, because he seems to always find himself in controversy. So news came out on the SAVE Act yesterday from Representative Tim Burchett. He confirmed the rumor that Mitch McConnell's Chief of Staff Terry Carmack won't allow the election integrity bill out of committee to give Thune and Cornyn cover for not bringing the bill to the floor for debate. This means not only can we not have tariffs, but we can also not have honest and fair elections. I think that's absolutely crazy that Mitch McConnell is covering for Thune and Cornyn, but that's where we are. We can't have honest, fair elections. We just got to let everybody vote. And it's on the behest of a person who isn't even running for re-election. I don't think he could run. I don't think he'd win. But that's where we are with the SAVE Act right now. Apparently it's not getting pushed forward because Mitch McConnell doesn't like it. His chief of staff doesn't like it. Two people that are going in, or one person that's going into retirement, and another person that apparently is just okay with the elections being stolen. I guess that's what it is. But we'll move on. Like I said, there's been lots going on in the last 24 hours. But unknowingly, I was correct in my assumption that the alien stuff was a distraction, as it has been debated to be used before as a distraction for the media. flying saucer stories were plotted to be planted by the CIA to distract the media during the overthrow of the Guatemalan president in 1954, meaning that this is, I guess, a long-standing tradition in U.S. government to use aliens as a distraction to actual issues going on, along with the use of UFO stories by the Air Force to mislead the public during the testing of a new spy plane in the 1950s. President Trump posted in regard to the release of UFO files, because I guess everybody's been asking for that. I remember I was asking for prosecutions for Epstein's co-conspirators. I was asking for the SAVE Act, but I'll get UFOs. We'll just get UFOs. Like I said yesterday, I don't think, anybody's life has actually been affected by aliens. I thought it was going to be a much bigger issue as a kid. Thought I'd possibly get abducted if I stayed out too late, stood directly under a streetlight or something. It never turned out to be an issue. It was a complete non-issue in my life. However, apparently for some people it is a major issue, as Donald J. Trump posted on Truth Social, based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomenon, and unidentified flying objects, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America. He didn't sign off with, what's the classic? Oh, what is that? Thank you for your attention to this matter. So that's a shocker. But I guess, we'll get UFO files. We won't get arrests. We won't get honest elections. We'll have UFO files and like it. I don't know, maybe it will become a pertinent issue in the coming days. But all this coincides with the finding of a stealth or low observable electronic warfare aircraft called the Excalibur at Area 51. The aircraft has been claimed to be designed to fly very, very high, but also very, very slow and incredibly quiet. So I guess it all just goes back to the 1950s. And just everything goes back to the 1950s with this alien distraction stuff, whether it be the government overthrowing the Guatemalan president or, testing random planes. I think we know where this plane will have its maiden voyage. If anybody wants to guess, I don't think it's gonna be over France. I think it's gonna be going to the Middle East. We'll move on. Children and low IQ people are fascinated with aliens. That's the American population. You're not wrong. I mean, our goldfish swipe up 60-second video max brains are, it's something to be studied. I don't know if we have the attention span to actually study that. I guess there's also that Facebook case going on in California on social media addiction. Maybe we'll see some revelations come out there, but we are just a low IQ population. But believe it or not, there are countries with a lower average IQ, much lower. But in other news, on the Iran rumors, at least China and possibly Russia as well will be coming to the defense, or at least aiding Iran in a possible U.S. intervention. These claims seem to have credibility. China has been posting satellite images of the U.S. military buildup in the Middle East to social media, identifying locations and labeling assets such as aircraft and ships. This is along with providing Tehran live satellite imagery of bases and BeiDou navigation data. I had to look up what this is. BeiDou is China's independent global military and commercial satellite navigation system, providing high accuracy positioning, navigation, and timing services worldwide. Meaning, they're showing where our ships are. They're showing our aircraft buildup. Now, I don't know why this is now focused on my... Is that better? Okay, that should be better. That was blurry. But yes, they're showing where our ships are. They're showing what assets are being deployed to the region. China is, as of right now, we'll get to what Russia's been doing in recent days. But on the alternative side of the conflict, European countries such as Bulgaria, Hungary, and Poland have signaled that they may be willing to go against EU policy and support the U.S. in an invasion of Iran. As of right now, it seems like it would be access to those countries' facilities for asset staging, not physical support. But they do seem to be loaning, leasing aircraft space for the U.S. for these resupplies, for this asset buildup. As of right now, the U.S. has reportedly amassed the biggest force in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And assets, as of today, or as of right now, are still being deployed to the region. Well, they're not being delivered right now. As moments ago, it was confirmed that the U.S. was evacuating troops from Qatar and Bahrain bases as a result of talks of an Iran strike. This has been a precautionary evacuation of personnel from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which is home to 10,000 U.S. troops in the Central Command headquarters, and the Navy 5th Fleet bases in Bahrain. So that's going on right now. Last time we've seen something similar, U.S. personnel evacuated from bases, was Iran's retaliatory strikes during after Operation Midnight Hammer. So that's going on right now. I'll check back in with that at the end of today's episode. But that was just right before we started that news broke. And just yesterday, here's to the Russian part of this. I'll just call it an axis of resistance. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, detected and tracked 2 Tu-95s, 2 Su-35s, and 1 A-50 operating in the Alaska Air Defense Identification Zone. Although these incursions are not unusual over Alaska, the timing doesn't seem to be a coincidence. You know, we've seen these before, a couple times a year. But given that there are rumors that Russia may be coming to the aid of Iran, I don't think of this as a low significance incursion of American airspace. I think this is meant to prove a point, a demonstration of force. That's where we are with the Russians. So Chinese are giving them intelligence. They've already given them tons and tons of weapons since the 12-Day War. And then the Russians are now doing high-profile flyovers of U.S. airspace. So it seems like there is a little bit of credibility to the assumption that Russia and China will be aiding Iran in the event of a conflict. But maybe our rogue EU members will help us out. They'll let us land at their airports. I'll be good. In Congress, moving on with this whole Iran situation, Congress is currently planning an Iran war powers vote as the president considers if and when to strike. This is actually going to go through Congress soon, probably before the SAVE Act. I want the SAVE Act. I don't want Iran strikes, but I don't want UFOs even. I could care less. But another issue is time. Time is of the essence as we're coming closer to a full moon, which would severely impact the ability for stealth strikes, such as those in Operation Midnight Hammer. This weekend will be in the same phase as it was on the night of Operation Midnight Hammer. However, with no Congressional War Powers Act and the USS Gerald R. Ford days away from the region, it makes it more likely the U.S. may need to wait weeks instead of the 10 to 15 day period talked about in recent days. I believe that was yesterday, if not the day before. But the alternative to waiting weeks for intervention would be going in with ground troops as well, which would be a public relations disaster for the White House on top of all the other ones they're currently juggling, especially without given power through Congress, which honestly, Congress seems a little too antsy for another round in the Middle East. I think they're getting way ahead of themselves, but that's to be expected. It's like America's favorite pastime is war in the Middle East at this point. The president could wait a few days until both Congress has approved the strikes and the USS Gerald R. Ford is in the region. However, the element of stealth will be lost as Iran will be brighter at night during the full moon, allowing both planes and troops being easier to spot, which is compounded by Iran's lack of light pollution, particularly outside major cities where military assets such as air defense are likely to be deployed. You don't just wait until the planes are over the cities to shoot them down. It's kind of a last resort and try and do it before. So these things are going to be out in the countryside looking up, seeing actual outlines of planes. There's going to be no stealth in that. You'll see the glow of people's eyes in the full moon. There's no stealth in that. But it does seem to be a little bit of a dilemma whether we'll wait for congressional approval and the arrival of the Gerald R. Ford carrier or just, go in guns blazing this weekend, no congressional approval, and likely would need a supplementary ground invasion. But Iran has begun hardening and concealing military sites across the region. There have been reports of not just military training at schools, but now there's also reportedly the storing of ammunition in hospitals, meaning that if this reporting is true, and there is a chance that it is, there's a chance that this is misinformation, it can be both of these. Schools, hospitals can be considered legitimate targets in conflict, which is scary, especially for the civilian populations, because these aren't, always flawless. There are civilians that do get hurt. You'd hope that they can get to a hospital, that the hospital hasn't been destroyed, but, this information does make these places legitimate targets, if it is true. Now, there's always the possibility that these are planted stories by foreign powers that just want to have justification to strike these areas. I think we've seen this before in the Middle East in the last couple of years. I think we've seen this many of times. But, if they're using them, they're fair game. But they are also hardening military sites, concealing them, camouflage, concrete, reinforcement. So Iran seems to be ready, or at least getting there. I don't know if you consider, storing ammunition in hospitals and troops in schools getting ready, but maybe that's what's going on. But we'll move on from the Iran thing for now. It's a rapidly developing situation, and we'll look back into it at the end to see if there's any new information on the evacuation of bases in Bahrain and Al Udeid Air Base in, Qatar? Yes, Qatar. I don't want to get that wrong. Wednesday night, there was a domestic terror attack attempt on a Idaho DHS office. The culprit stole an ambulance. Before this, he had staged gas cans, which were then packed into the ambulance. Then he rammed the ambulance into a DHS office. And the ambulance didn't explode, it didn't catch fire, luckily. It would have been a major tragedy if it did. But this is just another attack targeting DHS and ICE agents. They're sitting there in this office, currently not funded, along with the Coast Guard, because Congress can't agree on an appropriations bill to fund them, and they're going through this kind of junk. Nevertheless, all the junk they've been going through the last year. So, pray for these people. It's really, I guess, a dangerous job. A really dangerous job, especially with deranged people picking fights with you in the street, attacking you in the street, and now stealing ambulances, loading them up with gasoline. Is it back? Okay, I think we're back. No, it's a really dangerous time to work with DHS. Let me make sure everything's come back on everything. Can we get kickback? Okay, kick's back. It's rumble back, rumble's back. No, it's a really dangerous time to be a DHS agent. People picking fights with you in the street, bringing guns and extra magazines to protest, driving cars at you, driving ambulances loaded with fuel, loaded with propellant into your offices, and you're not even getting paid right now. It's absolutely unreal. I think, screw it. Give them another $10 billion a year just because of this. I'm fine with it. We're wasting money everywhere else. At least this would be a good use of our money. We were promised so many deportations and we're backing off. Fund them and make them go harder. That's my argument here. But that is just the life of DHS these days. And there's plenty of people that think that's okay. They think it's just all right, that they're having vehicles driven at them, fights picked with them, and that they aren't even getting paid right now. But people think that's just okay. But we'll move on from that. There was an interesting deposition to House Democrats yesterday. Les Wexner, an affiliate of Jeffrey Epstein, gave a deposition to the House Democrats on his relationship with Epstein and what he thought Epstein was, who he was associated with, that sort of thing. It was really interesting. Les Wexner's lawyer claimed that Epstein had done personal wealth for the Rothschilds, meaning the banking cabal that manipulates money throughout the world, including, not just limited to, but including the Federal Reserve, many Federal Reserves. And he'd done personal wealth with them and claimed that he talked to Ellie Day Rothschild, claiming that Epstein represented their whole family and a whole bunch of other people. People would call, I believe it was Leslie Wexner, who claimed they knew Jeffrey through a No, it was the Rothschilds who would call him and claim that they knew Jeffrey Epstein through a financial relationship. So apparently he's in tight with these people. Epstein would claim to him, as an example, that he was providing financial advice to the founders of Google. You know, maybe that's why it's almost impossible to get info relative to this case on the first page of a Google search. But no, Epstein would claim that he worked with people at Google. He would also mention Jeff Bezos in this deposition. Lots and lots of powerful people connected to the most powerful banking family in the world. They all claim that Jeffrey Epstein's their common link and that he provided financial advice for them, worked for them. I don't know. The dude's it's a little fishy, to say the least. Especially the relationship with the banking family and all these tech millionaires, billionaires. It's crazy that he had these relationships, doing personal wealth for all these people. But in an interview with former CIA spy John Kiriakou, he claimed that Jeffrey Epstein is a classic Israeli access agent. He claimed in this interview with Matt Gaetz, if you want information from very important people, somebody like Bill Clinton or Bill Gates or Prince Andrew, you're not going to recruit those people directly. So you do the next best thing. You recruit somebody who has access to them, somebody close to them. And you direct that person, in this case it would be Jeffrey Epstein, to become such close friends that because of that friendship, they're willing to give you sensitive, sometimes classified information. And I really believe that's what we've seen here. I would agree 100%. This is exactly what it looks like. But he also claimed in this interview that next in line for prosecution is going to be Peter Mandelson, formerly Lord Mandelson. He's now accused of having passed a classified document from the British Ministry of Defense to Jeffrey Epstein. So likely if Jeffrey Epstein, is working for MI6, he probably wouldn't have to manipulate somebody to pass a classified document from the British Ministry of Defense. But even if Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, is arrested, it's once again nobody in the United States. So we'll now be still, I guess, infinitely less effective than the British at arresting these people. Maybe there are ties to the United States as well. Or maybe we're infinite times 2 less effective. Because if there are 2 arrests, that's 2 more than we've seen, probably 2 more than we'll ever see, it seems. But the reason that Jeffrey Epstein would do this is, as Kiriakou cites, not only Jeffrey Epstein's personal history, but also his history with Ghislaine Maxwell, and the fact that their father was a well-known Israeli agent, and the fact that many of his contacts in the Israeli government were back and forth between Israel and his home, I think puts Israel at the top of the list. However, he claimed also in this interview that the latest tranche of information indicates that he actively sought contact with the CIA, the FBI, with British MI5, British MI6, with the Germans, and possibly even the Russians, claiming he even asked repeatedly for a private one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin. The Russians finally agreed to the meeting between Epstein and 4 people, including Putin, and Epstein turned that down. So I think that Epstein was maybe more than an access agent. He was an intelligence broker, or an intelligence peddler working both sides of the issue with multiple services. I think that's a fairly accurate assumption of what he was. All these inroads to all these places, and a normal agent would not be able to get somebody as high profile as him. It does seem that he's got a little bit more access to Russia, Britain, the UK, sorry. The UK, Russia, Israel, the US. He's got a lot more access than an average intelligence operator would. Germany even, allegedly. But I've, previously stated in private conversations that Epstein was basically a way into power, of which I could be wrong. But I claimed, if you compromised yourself with these children, sometimes on film, on camera, you'd be granted access to the upper echelons of society, with the main caveat being that they could hold it over your head. I personally do think that Epstein was a power broker. So basically, if you did compromise yourself, you could hold power. However, someone held power over you through this compromising information, compromising photos, videos, relationships. It seems like somewhat of like a puppet game, if that makes sense. I give you power, but I control you through compromising you. But this seems to be an issue in both of President Trump's presidencies, as he may be encircled by this in many means. Not just that he did anything, I don't know that the evidence points to that, but the people around him that are having their strings pulled are pulling his strings, and it's affecting the outcomes of presidencies. There's Attorney General Acosta, who previously gave Epstein a plea deal. There's Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is willing to cover for Epstein throughout her tenure as the Florida Attorney General. There's Steve Bannon, who's been mentioned countless times in the Epstein files. He's also interviewed Epstein himself and gave him advice on image maintenance after his 2008 sweetheart deal. But there's also darker ties. Allegedly, he also bought sulfuric acid, such as Epstein, to destroy evidence related to a Miami home, allegedly. And there's Howard Lutnick. I told you we'd get back to him. I promised. Who claims he cut Epstein off after the first meeting only to foster business deals with him. Philanthropy, if you can even call it that. I don't know that I would call anything related to Jeffrey Epstein philanthropy, but, if you want to call it philanthropy, it's philanthropy. And social meetings with Jeffrey Epstein after he claimed that he realized he was a predator during their first dinner together. If I realized somebody was a predator in my first dinner with them, I'd probably never see them again. But some people are all right with that, especially if you are compromised. But then there's also J.D. Vance, which has received funding from Les Wexner, who Epstein was the power of attorney of, who yesterday was questioned in the deposition, Leslie Wexner. He's given J.D. Vance money, so I don't know that they're not attempting the same tactic to encircle J.D. Vance's life, much like what seems to have happened in the last two Trump administrations. Another interesting point in this deposition was when his lawyer told him, "I will effing kill you if you answer another question with more than 5 words, okay?" He said that to Leslie Wexner, which I thought was, interesting, especially given the strange deaths surrounding this whole case in general. That there's also other people that have been mentioned in this. There's donors such as Peter Thiel. There's Miriam Adelson, which is an AIPAC bigwig. She lives in Israel, advocates for pro-Israeli Zionist policies. There's Jeffrey and Janine Yoss, who are Zionists. Paul Singer, another Zionist, and Laura and Isaac Perlmutter, who are also Zionists, donating big money to Trump, which is another way that you can pull people's strings in politics. Money. It gets you really far in politics, believe it or not, especially when we're not running on policy anymore. We're running on the next election. We're running on give me money for my next campaign and I'll do it next time. It's about as close as we get to policy. It's always policy for the next time. But it does seem like the man who's always right beside, or behind, depending on how you look at it, President Trump, Howard Lutnick, is involved, possibly way too deeply, especially given what we figured out today with the buying up tariff refunds, the rights to tariff refunds with his family's firm. You know, he's about as good with manipulating money as Epstein, you know, especially given Epstein's big gains right before the 2008 economic crash. You can look that up. He was shorting right before the economy crashes down, sold off everything, and was able to, you know, get off scot-free in the months right before everybody else lost everything, if not most of their stuff. But it is interesting, especially these people having such good money luck as compared to the rest of us. But there's also Pam Bondi, who failed to address victims' concerns for 8 years during her tenure as Florida Attorney General. And there's also, you know, the donors and previous members of the cabinet, such as Steve Bannon, who's tied up in this as well. You know, I don't think it's crazy to assume that these people were possibly placed there to help control the narrative. I wonder if I can, you know, we'll just roll with it. I don't think it's crazy to assume that. It could be. You know, is it crazy to assume that these people are placed around Trump to control him? Is it crazy to ask that question? Kind of like how Epstein seemed to be placed in America as this power broker for people. Is it crazy to ask that? You know, even if Epstein could have compromised Trump, as much of the media wants you to believe. Like I said earlier, I don't believe that that's the case. I don't believe Trump was compromised, just given his reporting of the situation to police, cooperating with investigations. You can't say the same for everybody else, especially the people that have lied under oath on this matter. Trump's never been caught up in that mess. He always seems to have sought accountability, removed Epstein from his life. But we're just, you know, supposed to assume that this is all Trump. I think it's the people around Trump pulling the strings that make this look so disgusting, so bad, so evil. I don't think it's Trump, honestly. I think it's the people that have been placed around him that are purposefully doing this. I don't think that's crazy to assume. You know, is there a possibility that these assets were placed into his cabinet just to compromise him, ruin his credibility, and shift his focus away from U.S. policy, the foreign policy, to shift his focus to, you know, foreign interest as opposed to the interests of the people that vote for him? I find, you know, this theory is probably much more likely to be true, especially given the facts of he was banned from Mar-a-Lago due to his interactions with Trump's staff. Trump called the police on him, cooperated with police investigations. So I think, you know, the theory that he's been surrounded by these people probably unknowingly is much more likely, given the facts that the public currently knows. It's not crazy to ask the question. I don't think Trump can be controlled, but people in his cabinet sure have made some questionable decisions. It's like they're working for somebody else. They're not working for the American people. It doesn't seem like it, at least. But we'll go further with this. So if Epstein was Mossad, and the people surrounding the president are compromised by Mossad, it would start to seem to make at least a little bit of sense why we would be fighting Iran on Israel's behalf, especially given that Congress, whose both parties' major donors are AIPAC, are expected to give the president the green light to strike Iran in the coming days, a war that doesn't benefit Americans by any stretch of the imagination. I guess unless you're holding stocks in defense contractors and have barrels of oil in storage. I guess if that's what you're doing, maybe you will see a benefit from this. You have billions of barrels of oil and defense stocks. You might turn out better at the end of all this. But a war with Iran isn't, in general, to the benefit of Americans. Like I say, it's just going to cause young kids coming back in body bags and the price of oil to skyrocket here at home. But it is expected of Congress, given that AIPAC is a major funder of both political parties, the 2024 political campaigns, and AIPAC will likely continue to be the major donor for both parties during the 2026 midterms, just because the U.S. will not outlaw funding from our greatest ally. You know, we've never ever signed a formal defensive pact with Israel, but they are our greatest ally. We don't even have an alliance with them. It's just something we're told, something, if you tell somebody something so many times, they begin to believe it. That's our relationship with Israel. We've been told that they're our allies so many times, we're just expected to believe that's the case. But they would strike us in a heartbeat if it benefited them. It's true. But it seems like our greatest allies using us, the U.S., to do their dirty work and has compromised parts of our society, Congress, executive cabinet. So, we don't get what we voted for. We get what Israel wants us to do. There's another strange story. This will be the last story of the day. I saw this earlier and I was like, or I think it was last night I saw this and I thought, that is too strange of a coincidence. Then I'll remember to go back to the Iran situation. But another strange murder took place in recent days involving another prominent university scientist. Just over 2 months after the murder of Nuno Loureiro, which was a prominent plasma scientist and professor at MIT. If you don't recall, he was murdered in the string of crimes involving the Brown University shooting. But let's see if I can find it. I didn't have time to go through it all the way. It was Carl Grillmeyer. He was a Caltech astrophysicist at the Infrared Processing and Analysis Center, specializing in galactic astronomy, dark matter, sounds familiar, stellar streams, galactic structure, and exoplanets. He led projects on Hubble and Spitzer telescopes and discovered multiple stellar streams in the Milky Way, and earned a NASA exceptional Scientific Achievement Medal. So another you know, great scientist murdered strangely just on his front porch, gunned down. The second one in roughly, just a little over 2 months. There are, nations that do, this is their business. Their spies are implemented to go and kill scientists, great scientists, leading scientists. We've seen this during the 12 Days War when Iran had multiple scientists murdered. They're more valuable targets than that of the generals just because of what they allow society to do. But we've now seen in about 2 months, murders of prominent scientists in America, leading scientists on the leading edge of discovery, which I think it's a little weird. I think it's, MIT, Caltech. These aren't bad schools, especially their sciences departments. Astrophysicists and plasma scientists, people that would be able to contribute lots and lots to society, dying early because of nobody knows. Lots of people do believe that the MIT thing was a targeted attack on Nuno Loureiro. But I can't imagine that, this one isn't another targeted attempt. Their murder, it's not like you accidentally got the wrong person. No, you went to their house and eliminated them. Now, why are we eliminating scientists? Well, either A, to conceal information, or B, to prevent information from being discovered. So there's no good reason for this. And I can think of, one intelligence operation I've mentioned earlier that's really, really good at this kind of thing. They specialize in it. They've done it before in the 12 Days War. That's where we are today. I'll do a quick refresh on the U.S. evacuation from Qatar and Bahrain. It looks like evacuation is still underway. Somebody responded in Arabic. That's not good. Okay. There's lots of responses in Arabic, so that's interesting. We'll see if anything's posted in this way. While I'm doing this, make sure y'all are dropping a like, subscribing on YouTube, following on Kick, following on Rumble. Subscribe on Rumble if you feel giving. I'd appreciate anybody that's willing to support this show financially. You can just click on the little $ button. You can do a one-time donation monthly. You can subscribe there. And that gives you red highlighted texts, such as what MSJ 1970 has. Great long-term subscriber, great supporter of the show. I appreciate them. Doesn't seem like there's any new information regarding the Iran thing other than that U.S. troops are being evacuated. It doesn't show that a war has broken out yet, thank goodness. But it could happen at any time. Anytime it could break out now. Everything's set up for it. The war drums are beaten. Just one small thing going wrong, and we'll be in probably the costliest war of any of our lifetimes here. Yeah, I'll go ahead and go through the chats. I appreciate y'all sticking around today. It was a long show. We're already over an hour. There's so much going on. It's like the Lenin quote in the description. There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. I think feels like a whole decade's happened today, at least in the last 24 hours. But I think we'll be caught up going into the weekend, and I'll be back on Monday at 4:45 with another show. Hopefully not on a war with Iran. Hopefully they'll figure something out, but it's not up to me. It's not up to us at this point. It's up to the powers that be. So I'll read through these chats. By the way, what did Pam Bondi do? It appears someone is jerking her around. I don't understand her. It seems that she's been compromised since 2011. I don't know what she's done. Maybe she's of relation to someone, protecting somebody. I don't understand her antics right now. I also don't understand Kash Patel. I don't understand his antics right now. I guess the only one of the group that I understand is Dan Bongino, and he quit. He's a quitter. He's back doing podcasts. He's competition now. It's competition. Hello, official Sam Jones. Where can I find the not official one? I don't know. You'll have to find the not official one. I'm the official one. I'm the real Sam Jones. Could the real Sam Jones please stand up? No, not yet. Not right now. I'm wrapping it up here. But I think I've gone through all of these. Let me check YouTube and see if there's anything of importance here. Okay. No, nothing of super importance in the YouTube chats. But yeah. Hope there's no conflict this weekend. Hope we get justice with this Epstein mess. It's just a PR mess at this point. Hope we get the SAVE Act. And I guess hope we can get some tariffs back on the table, so we can fund our nation. That's all we've got for today. Make sure y'all are dropping a like. I'll see you guys again Monday at 4:45. I'm going to be gone tomorrow working, so I will not be able to have an episode. I may be able to upload a, what do you call it? A guest podcast, maybe tomorrow. I doubt it'll be tomorrow. It'll probably be next weekend. Hopefully I'll be able to do that tomorrow while at work. So that'll be the goal. But yeah, make sure you guys are dropping a like, subscribing, turning on notifications so you'll get the notification I'll be live when I'll be live on Monday. Sorry. Lots has been going on today. Mind is scrambled. But I hope I, made some sense of all this to everybody. That's always the goal. Speaking of always, I always appreciate you guys that stick around to the end. So thank y'all for doing that. I've got a few people left y'all are the real fans. Y'all aren't fair weather 10-minute fans, so I appreciate that. We'll end it here. To all my people on the East Coast, hope you get home safe. To my people further west, I hope you finish up your workday strong. Get home safe as well. Everybody have a good weekend. Pray for peace. We voted for it. Hopefully we'll get it. Talk to y'all soon.